Alright, in this video we're going to talk about sampling techniques. Okay, so we've already learned about the difference between a population and a sample, where the population is the whole group and sample is just a part of that group. So a census then is a count or measure of an entire population. So if I take a census, I am asking the same questions or looking at the same characteristics of an entire population, every single member. Alright. Often this can be costly or very difficult to perform due to the size of a population. So if, for example, the population that I wanted to study was the United States of America, there are over 300 million people in the United States. It's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for me to get information on every single one of those 320 million or whatever it is that live in the U.S. Right? Because that is often so difficult, that's why we take samples. So we take a small piece of the population and study it because we can get data on a smaller number. But in order to carry that conclusion forth to the entire population, we have to make sure that our sample is what we call representative. All right, and so if our sample is representative, it means it roughly matches the rest of the population. So if, for example, let's say that 20% of the population in the United States is 18 or younger, all right, then if I took a sample of people, I would expect about 20% of that sample to also be under 18 years old. That would mean that my sample reflects my population. So we have different ways of taking samples to try and ensure that they are representative. One way is to take a simple random sample. All right, this uses a random number generator. So what we would do is we would take our entire population and we would give everybody a number. All right, and then we would use either a computer or a calculator or a table to generate some random numbers. So in this example, we said there are 187 students taking advanced math at Patriot, and we want a sample of 8 of them. So we would give all 187 of them a number, and then we would use a calculator or a computer program to randomly pull out 8 numbers, and those 8 numbers would be our 8-person sample. All right. There are computer programs. There's probably random number generators online if you Google them. When we get to class, I will show you how to use the random number generator on your calculator. Alright, second way to take a sample is called a stratified sample. So we're going to break our population into strata. Alright, or strata means groups. Our groups could be things like age. So we could say 0 to 10 years old is one strata. 10 to 20 is another strata. We could break them up like that. We could break them up by gender. So all the male are one strata and then all the females are one strata. There's lots of different ways we could break things apart. And then once we have them broken into our different strata, we take a random sample, alright, so a simple random sample like we just talked about, from each different group. So let's say we wanted to ask a question of only the upperclassmen at Patriot, so not the freshmen, alright, but we're going to ask sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So we would split our population, all the sophomores in one group, all the juniors in one group, all the seniors in one group. And then we're going to take a sample from each one. So I'm going to take some sophomores, some juniors, some seniors, and then this would be my sample that I would study characteristics of. A third way of taking a sample is called a cluster sample. So our population are again in groups, but this time we're going to just pick one group to sample. All right, this works when your groups are kind of the same. So we can't use it the same as strata. We couldn't split people by gender and then sample only the females, because then we wouldn't have any males in our sample and it wouldn't be representative of the population. So this works when your groups are kind of split apart evenly. A good example would be if we want to survey Algebra 1 students, okay, we could just pick one class and survey that one class. And that one class should be fairly representative of the rest of the Algebra 1 students. This picture here has an example of breaking people up by what street they live on. So these are the people on Maple Street, Main Street, and First Street, and if I just sample the people on Main Street, that would give me a good sample of the population. Another way to do it is just to pick a systematic sample. So we just number everyone off and we take every nth. Nth means just pick whatever number you want. Every 5th person, every 100th person. So we're going to stand outside of Chipotle, and every 4th person that walks in, we're going to ask them a survey question. All right, that's a systematic sample. We're just taking every so often an interval of people. And the last one, which is not usually a good method of sampling, is a convenience sample. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You survey the people that are easiest for you to ask. All right, so if we are trying to study the population of Patriot High School, and you just say, well, I'll just sample the people at my lunch table. Well, that's not going to work, because the people that you eat lunch with are probably all in the same grade as you. They probably have similar interests. If you guys are friends, maybe you eat lunch with all the members of the lacrosse team. Well, that's not really a good representation of the population of Patriot High School. If you all play lacrosse, first of all, you're all male. If you all play varsity lacrosse, you're probably all juniors or seniors. So it just doesn't represent the population very well. So a convenience sample, not usually a good method of sampling, because it often results in bias. All right, and bias is when the sample is not representative of the population from which it was drawn. Okay, so your sample looks way different than the rest of the population. There's some bias in there. There are a couple different kinds of bias. First, we have selection bias, and that has to do with how the sample is selected. So if the sample was selected incorrectly, there could be some selection bias. 2 examples of selection bias. One is called voluntary response bias. Okay, so that's when only people who have really strong feelings about something are going to be represented. Example, if they're talking about something on the radio and they ask people to call in and give their opinion or answer some question that they're trying to figure out, the chances of someone calling in are only high if they actually care about that issue. So if they are talking about whether or not Tom Brady should be suspended on SportsCenter and ask people to call in and comment or tweet and comment, the only people that are going to tweet are the people that really care about whether or not Tom Brady plays. If they don't care anything about football, they're not going to respond. And then those people are excluded from your sample. All right? A non-response bias, when a large portion of the sample does not respond to a survey. So if we send out 10,000 surveys and we only get 50 of them back, there's a chance that our sample is not representative of the population because so few people chose to respond. Right. Response bias is different. Our sample could be good, but our questions, if we're giving a survey, could be bad and could lead to bias. So that would be response bias. When we have things loaded questions, all right, questions that kind of they're written in a way that kind of forces people to answer one way or another. So here's an example. Do you favor repeal of the death tax? Really, the question should stop right there because there's no opinions, there's only facts in that question. Do you favor repeal of the death tax? But the question goes on and says, use words like unfairly, burdened, hefty, grief. All of those words are negative, so it's giving a negative connotation to the death tax and could be influencing people's answers. Then we have leading questions, which indicate which answer the survey wants. Don't you agree? People in human nature, they want to agree. So if you ask them a question, don't you agree? Unless they have really strong feelings about something, they're probably just going to be like, yeah, I agree, just because it's easier. They don't want confrontation. We could have double-barreled questions, which means we're asking 2 questions at once. All right. Do you agree that campus parking is a problem and that the administration should be working diligently on the solution? That's 2 different questions. 1, do you agree that it's a problem? And 2, do you think administration should be working on a solution? All right. How would you answer that question if you agree with the first part and not the second part? You don't really give people an option to actually say what they're talking about if you have two questions in one. And then the last one is a forced choice, when there's no other or I don't know or not applicable type option. All right. For example, President Obama recently revealed in an interview that he is more a Trekkie than a Star Wars fan. Are you a Star Wars fan or a Trekkie? Well, what if you're neither? What if you like both? All right. The question only was an either or option. There were no other choices. All right. That's it for 1B. See you guys in class.